Windbreaker starts off strong as an anime that is showing great potential. But does the first episode premiere have red flags for us Christians? Let's go through the first episode together and find out. What's going on, fam? Welcome to the Adoname podcast, where we watch anime with the redemptive eyes of a Christian believer. My name is Manny, and today we're going to be going over the first episode of the new anime called Windbreaker. So just a little bit of information about this new anime. It falls under the subgenres of action, delinquents, and school. It's also made by Clover Works. The first episode premiered the 5th of April 2024, and it's falling under the rating of PG-13. So without further ado, let's get right into the episode. So the episode starts with a dark background with a white silhouette of a young man nervously walking on a tightrope to the sound of a heartbeat. So already pretty interesting intro. So then we hear voices of people criticizing him for his looks, and apparently he has bad behavior, and these voices are complaining about it. So then when that's escalating, we see the young man finally falling from the tightrope. And then the scene shifts suddenly to the same young man who's just woken up from that dream, visibly annoyed with it, obviously. So now we know that that intro was a dream. And then the scene changes to a shopping street with many people walking around and working or shopping. And the young man appears walking down the street. And then we hear him narrating. And this is where it starts getting interesting. He says, "I love the strong, got no interest in the weak." I saw this and said, okay, where are you going with this? In what way do you love the strong? Why don't you care about the weak? And I think it's worth taking a moment just to talk about this for a moment. What kind of people could think like this, right? What kind of people could be saying something like this? People in power, politicians, police officers, government officials, even preachers, quote unquote. Like, when you really think about it, that's a pretty scary statement when you apply it in that way. If we find ourselves agreeing with this statement, I think we need to examine ourselves in light of what the scriptures say. And just to share a few scriptures, the book of Proverbs, chapter 31, verses 8 through 9. "Open your mouth for the mute, for the rights of all who are destitute. Open your mouth, judge righteously, defend the rights of the poor and needy." And then the book of Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, chapter 12, verses 9 through 10. "But he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore I will boast all the more gladly of my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may rest upon me. For the sake of Christ, then, I am content with weaknesses, insults, hardships, persecutions, and calamities. For when I am weak, then I am strong." So we see here very clearly, God cares about those who are helpless, and he delights in those that are honest about their weaknesses, and they'll be blessed by God. So just food for thought. Just wanted to drop that there. Let's keep going. So then we see some thugs cornering and talking to a young woman who's clearly upset that this is happening. And she's trying to get away from them, trying to walk away. But the main thug grabs her hard by the wrist to stop her from getting away. And then we hear the narration again from the protagonist that says, "The weak who mistakenly think they're strong." And then in this moment, we see the protagonist confront the thug, and he tries to hit the protagonist, but the whole squad gets pretty much pummeled by the protagonist. And here he's claiming victory, and he introduces himself, Sakura Haruka. I think I said it backwards. And then the intro song starts. So pretty interesting intro. And I'd really like, and at this point, I'm like, I really like to see where he's going with this whole strength declaration that he's making. So let's keep going. And then After the intro song, then we see the girl run up to him and she thanks him, but he reacts pretty embarrassingly, which was kind of a weird reaction from him, but let's keep going. She then invites him to eat and she cooks him food at a little cafe that it looks like she works there or partially owns it. I don't know. But she's basically by herself there working. And she begins to tell him about the town and how it's been dangerous because of gangs and thugs. And here she introduces herself as Kotoha Tachibana, but he wonders why she's being so nice to him after she saw that he beat all those guys up. And she starts mentioning how weird he looks with the half black, half white hair, and then the different colored eyes. How he has one that's much brighter than the other one, and he gets kind of weirded out that she isn't looking to start problems with him. And he seems like weirded out that someone's not being confrontational against him. And we see it's because he's used to people judging him for the way that he looks. And I want to pause here for a moment because what Kotoha, this girl, does is an example that we should follow. In what way? Instead of coming up with her own conclusions about him after seeing how he looks, she asks questions. This is super, super important for us. A lot of us tend to write people off because of how they look or dress right off the bat. And I think we should adopt this strategy that she does. When we find ourselves judging in our hearts, we have to ask questions. Learn about the person, hear their story, create a connection, and see where they're coming from. That way we grow in empathy towards that person and we can pray for them with a heart that cares for them little by little. The book of John, chapter 7, verse 24 says, "Do not judge by appearances, but judge with right judgment." Right? And to do this, we need the guidance of the Holy Spirit, which we receive when we ask in faith. And if we struggle with this sin, we have to confess it to God, first of all, so that we can receive forgiveness. But then we should also be quick to ask for forgiveness to those that we do judge wrongly. I think a conversation like that would be a beautiful and honest conversation and connection with that person. And they'll likely see that your intentions are good, that you are trying to understand them, that you are trying to have a good relationship with them. And I think that's very, very important for us. And we have to keep that in mind. But let's keep going. So then Haruka starts talking about how he came to this town to be the strongest in Furin High School, with the strongest of the strong students, the scummiest of the scum, as he says it. So then she starts teasing him about it a little in a pretty funny way. And he gets a little annoyed, but it's all in good humor, nothing crazy. And then an elder man walks by who was inside the restaurant. And he thanks her for the meal, and he's starting to walk out of the restaurant. And Haruka calls his attention since the elder man apparently forgot his bag. So then the older man thanks him, and he walks out. And Kotoha then gives Haruka some candy for his kindness. But he blushes and he's embarrassed again for doing something good, which is a weird reaction to have. But we're starting to little by little understand why he's having these reactions. And we see that he really doesn't understand how he could receive thanks when he looks like a delinquent. That's the main focus here. So then she starts telling him that he picked a good school, but he can't even dream of becoming number one. They wouldn't even look at him. And the reason why is because he's alone. He's by himself. It's just him. And he gets really upset about this and then ends up walking out of the restaurant angry. And then the scene changes to the streets of the town where a bunch of thugs are breaking everything, causing a bunch of chaos. And Haruka shows up, and it turns out that it's the same group of guys he was beating up earlier, but now it's many more of them, and they've come for revenge. And these thugs, they start making fun of him, how he looks, And Haruka is starting to feel like the situation actually makes sense to him now. How they reject him. This feels like familiar territory for him. And he starts narrating, thinking in his head, but we can hear what he's thinking. And he's thinking that he wants to find value in himself and how beating the guy in front of him would mean that he's better than him. And then he remembers what Kotoha said about him being alone. And then he clenches his fists and punches the guy in the face and says inside himself, "You reject me for how I look, and I know I look weird, but this is who I am." And he begins to fight the rest of the guys, and he obliterates them pretty good, mostly. And I gotta admit, I really like the fight scene. It was really smooth fighting. I really enjoyed the fight scenes. Not that I'm agreeing with all of the fighting, but it's a cool fight scene. So then he beats them up pretty good until Kotoha shows up, and one of the guys, one of the thugs, grabs her as a hostage, and he's holding a knife. But then Kotoha sprints at him and kicks him in the face pretty hard, and then he frees her, which was pretty risky move. And he had plenty of time to be a little bit more threatening with the knife, but whatever. It's a show. It's an anime, and he continues to fight, and then he's showing how strong he really is. He's really, really strong. But now that he's trying to protect Kotoha, he's starting to lose his edge in the fight. And then he starts getting surrounded by them, and now he's questioning himself. Why is he protecting her? He doesn't understand why he's doing that or why he cares. That doing something for someone else never results to anything good. That's what he's saying. And he continues to try to fight, but then one guy grabs the knife and stabs his ankle. And at that point, he's feeling really powerless to protect her. And he's about to get hit in the head with a bat when all of a sudden a young man in a Furin high school uniform shows up and blocks the hit. And this guy beats the thug, and we see others like him approaching, and they're ready to fight, also in the same uniforms. And Haruka is confused as to why they would even help him. And then the Furin guys start beating the guys up, and the leader tells Haruka to stay back so he can protect him. And then we start hearing cheers from the buildings, people coming out of the windows to cheer for the Furin guys. And Haruka's really confused, doesn't understand what's going on. And then Kotoha begins to explain to him how the town used to be run by dangerous gangs, but everything changed 2 years ago, and it was thanks to Furin High students that they put up a sign on the neighborhood's edge, and it says this, quote, "Anyone past this point who causes pain, who brings destruction, who holds evil in their heart, will be purged by Furin without exception," end quote. So then the leader starts to shout at the thugs, reminding them of this sign that they posted. And it turns out that these guys from Furin High are the guardians of the town, and they go by Furin, the windbreaker. So then the fight is over, and everyone is cheering, and Kotoha continues, saying, yes, they are the scummiest of scum, and they still fight, but now for a good cause, to help and protect people. At this point, Haruka is just looking upset. He doesn't understand. He's thinking it sounds like they're heroes of justice, which kind of bothers him for a moment. But the people don't reject them, even though they look like thugs. And he's shocked by this. He doesn't comprehend this. And the townspeople start approaching him, and they start thanking him, and they see that his ankle is bleeding, so they start trying to treat his ankle and help him. But then he yells at them to stop, which catches everyone's attention. And Kotoha then tells him he's alone, but not willingly, and the people will come to depend on him, the people of the town. So then he starts getting upset, and he says he doesn't need anyone. But she says, then why did you help the elderly man? And this shocked him. He doesn't know what to answer. And she's like, why did he save her? Why did you save me? And she says he hasn't given up on others yet. And he doesn't need to. That at least she acknowledges him. And if he acknowledges her and the others back, he'll become exactly what he wants to be. And I thought this moment was beautiful. For me, it was a really good moment. It actually almost made me cry because it reminded me of God's goodness in our loneliness. He's so amazing. And even though we may have bad experiences with people, He puts people in our lives that have the potential to be like family. But we have to do what Koto has said, to acknowledge them back. This is huge. To make the effort to make that connection. We can't be suspicious and always expect the worst of everyone. It's good to be smart, right? To be able to judge the fruit of people. And yes, making friends can be painful sometimes, but with God's guidance, it can be a really fruitful and wonderful experience. And not only that, but essential in our lives with Christ. Community is essential. To be part of a community that loves each other, that prays for each other, that reaches out to each other to grow together. It's one of the most amazing experiences that we can have here on earth, and that we'll also have in heaven, because we'll be with Jesus, but we'll also be with God's people. And when we get to experience that here, we experience a little bit of what heaven is going to be like. Community is important, it's precious, and it's something that we all should ask the Lord for. To find a good and healthy community of people that love Jesus and can help us grow, and vice versa. And I love this scene for reminding me of that. It was beautiful. So let's finish off here as the episode is about to be over. Haruka then acts like he's upset, but then he confesses that he finds their resolve pretty awesome, which was kind of cheesy for me, but it is what it is. And then Kotoha narrates this moment and says, this story is how a boy at the lowest of the low, hated by all, worth nothing but his fists, became the hero of the town. And then the episode ends there. So I have to say, I really enjoyed this first episode, and it shows a lot of promise. The plot of having a low life, quote unquote, and become the hero is almost always a great plot, honestly, because it has that redemption element. And that's one of my favorite things to see in a show. And we know that as Christians, that's very important for us, as we can definitely relate to how Christ redeemed all of us from our sins and our past. The whole fighting part might be a bit extra for us to apply in real life, obviously, or I hope it's obvious. Though in this case, it's mostly self-defense, and that's great. But to have it in this context of protecting other people is even better. And for the sake of the anime, I think it's fine in its context. But let's just see how that progresses, because things can change, and maybe some people abuse it in some way. Not everyone in the group could be perfect in the Fury High School. But for the most part, I think we can look forward to this one. And hopefully they stick to that path of pursuing righteousness and redemption and defending people, defending the town, and doing good and having no evil in their heart. I love that part. So let's see. But I think it has a lot of great potential. And once this season is over, I'm going to do a flag review on it. So then we can talk about exactly what happened in the season, and if it has lots of great values that we can learn from, and if they ended up going down a bad path with this anime. I don't know. We'll just have to find out. Well, that's it. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you next time. Until then, grace and peace. Thank you guys so much for joining us on this episode of the Adoname Podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and leave us a rating. You can also follow us on Instagram at Adoname Podcast. Until next time, grace and peace.